The orchard wakes early in April. Pale blossoms catch the first light along the ridge, and Ruth Calloway steps onto her porch to listen for her bees. Ruth is 71. 3 generations of Calloways have kept hives in this valley, reading the wind the way other people read a clock. Her grandmother taught her about the valley breath, a strange reversing wind that comes through for an hour each blossom week, gone before anyone notices it arrived. A black van comes up the orchard road one morning, Vance Whitfield stepping out first, holding a tablet that shows 300 new dwarf apple trees in neat rows. Helios AgriTech has bought the 400 acres next door, building what Vance calls a smart bloom orchard, pollinated entirely by drones instead of bees. Ruth watches a demonstration swarm lift off above the new orchard, tiny machines moving tree to tree in perfect formation, precise as a held breath. She tells Vance about the valley breath, the hour each spring when the wind reverses without warning. His drones, she says, won't see it coming. Vance smiles, taps his tablet. Our flight algorithm accounts for wind shear up to 30 miles an hour, Mrs. Calloway. Ruth doesn't argue, just walks back toward her hives. If you've ever watched someone with all the data in the world ignore the one thing no sensor can measure, stay with me. Subscribe if you like this kind of story. May brings construction to the far side of the property line, Vance walking the rows as charging towers rise above the new dwarf trees like silver lampposts. Vance walks the crew through installing sensor masts every 20 rows, mapping temperature, humidity, and light, feeding it all into one central flight schedule. Ruth watches from her fence some mornings, says nothing, just notes the date and the way the air feels in her own weathered notebook. The first test flights go smooth on calm days, Vance watching from the edge of the grove as drones lift in tight formation, dusting blossom after blossom. Vance walks the rows each morning, checking his tablet, confident his algorithm has already solved a problem far older than his company. Ruth's hives stay calm through April, her bees working the same blossoms an hour or two earlier than the drones, finishing before the wind ever shifts. One warm afternoon, Ruth notices her bees pulling back into the hive early, an hour before they normally would, and waits to see why. The valley breath doesn't come that day. She writes the date anyway, the way her grandmother taught her, just in case the pattern is changing. Blossom Week begins in earnest that year, both orchards opening their flowers within days of each other, racing the same short, fragile window. Vance schedules the full drone fleet for a single coordinated flight across all 300 trees, timed for the warmest hour of the morning. Inside the drone hub, Vance checks monitors tracking battery levels and flight paths, a soft hum filling the room as the swarm prepares to launch. Ruth checks her bees at sunrise that morning, notices them clustering tighter than usual at the hive entrance, unwilling to leave just yet. She feels it before she can name it, a faint shift in the air pressure, the valley breath gathering itself somewhere up the ridge. Vance gives the launch command from the control room, watching the swarm lift off the charging towers in one smooth, silent wave. The drones rise above the blossoms in tight formation, moving tree to tree exactly as planned, exactly as the algorithm had promised all along. 11 minutes in, the valley breath arrives, reversing without warning, the way it always has, the way no sensor mast was built to predict. The wind doesn't roar, it just turns, quiet and total, and from the control room window, Vance watches the trees shift against 300 machines never trained for this exact angle. Flight paths begin to drift almost at once, drones correcting against a wind that keeps changing direction faster than the algorithm can recalculate it. One drone clips a low branch, another hovers in place, fighting a gust that won't hold steady long enough for it to read. Inside the hub, Vance watches his formations scatter across the screen, the swarm breaking apart tree by tree across the whole orchard. Ruth, standing at her fence, watches her own bees still tucked inside their hives, waiting out the wind exactly the way they always have. By the time the wind settles, less than half the new orchard's blossoms have been touched, pollen scattered everywhere except where it needed to land. Vance walks the rows alone that evening, counting untouched blossoms one by one, the petals already starting to close without ever being visited. Ruth's own trees finish blooming 2 days later, her bees moving steady and unhurried through branches still heavy with open, waiting flowers. The difference becomes impossible to ignore by June, Ruth standing at the fence line as fruit clusters form thick on her side, the new orchard's branches mostly bare. Helios sends a team of agronomists to walk the failed rows, measuring fruit set percentages that fall far below anything the investors were promised. Ruth shows the agronomists her grandmother's old notebook, the page marked decades ago with the exact week the valley breath always arrives. The agronomist's report confirms it within days, a documented wind pattern, recorded for generations, that no sensor mast had ever been built to catch. Vance reviews the report alone in his office that night, the charts laid out beside numbers that no longer add up the way they used to. Investors arrive in plain rental cars that fall, walking the quiet orchard slowly, asking questions about yield projections nobody can answer anymore. The insurance claim takes months to settle, auditors comparing drone flight logs against a wind record that had been sitting in a farmhouse drawer the whole time. By the following spring, Ruth walks past the charging towers standing unused and silent, silver poles rising over rows of trees nobody has scheduled to fly anymore. Vance is reassigned before the second blossom season even begins, the project quietly folded into a larger division nobody mentions by name anymore. The Smart Bloom orchard sits half-tended through summer, its rows growing wild at the edges where no algorithm thought to look. Mara, a young woman who once charged the drones each morning, walks over the fence line one afternoon, asking Ruth if she still needs help with the hives. Ruth hands her a smoker and a soft brush, shows her how to read a hive without ever needing to open it all the way. Mara learns to listen for the hum that changes before a storm, the same hum Ruth's grandmother taught her to listen for 60 years ago. Ruth doesn't lecture. She just tells Mara that the wind was never the problem, only the people who stopped listening to it. The orchard settles back into its old rhythm that fall, Ruth watching from her porch as bees work steady through the last warm days, the valley breath right on time.